Your obsession's probably your superpower. Because if you think about it, like if you see that thing as a gift from God, whatever you're obsessed with, if you can see it as a gift from God and use it for redemptive purposes,
Wow.
then maybe that's a grace that God has given you in your life to double down on.
Welcome back to the Dream Support Podcast, where we help leaders get out of the weeds so they can actually lead. But today, we're going one level deeper because the truth is most leaders don't struggle with delegation because they don't know what to do. They struggle because of how they think. And that's why I'm really excited about this conversation. Today, I'm joined by Gary Chupik. Gary is an international speaker, a professional mental performance coach, and a leadership coach who has worked with elite athletes, professional teams, and high-level business leaders across the country. But what really stood out to me is this: he doesn't just teach performance, he unlocks it. And for those of you listening, whether you have an assistant, are thinking about hiring one, or just feel like you're carrying too much right now, this conversation is going to hit right at the core of that. Enjoy. Hey, Gary, thanks for joining me on the Dream Support Podcast. I really appreciate you taking some time with me today. I know that you've got a lot going on and a lot to offer anybody who is a leader, maybe overwhelmed, maybe trying to figure out what their next move is, or even just trying to come out of a difficult season or a funk even. I'd love for you to just give an introduction for your business, what you're up to, and anything interesting that you're doing these days.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Micah. My name is Gary Chupik from Seattle, Washington, and I'm a mental performance coach. I unlock performance of professional teams and athletes, and more in the business world. More and more people are starting to catch on that mental performance is not just for athletes, but it's for either corporate athletes or, in fact, even everyday moms and people who are stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads. And we're all just sort of realizing that coping is just, in terms of mental health, is just not enough, that there's another level. And that's what I like to focus my time on is helping people not just think for prevention and get out of crisis, but also for thriving and elevating their mental performance.
Yeah, that is, I find that such a curious whole industry, the idea of like, especially the sports performance and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I watch it in my son, he's in 6th grade. He's in baseball right now. He had a game last night, and you can see the kids when something bad happens and they sort of shut down, right? And you see that. I know this is really, how should I say it? This is probably a bigger conversation than we have time for. But if you were to give a 1, 2, or 3 quick advice for the parents trying to help their kids enjoy a sport and have fun and play at a level that they would like to play, what would be those quick tips?
Yeah, I would say number one, make sure your kid is having a lot of fun. If they're not having fun, then, there's no amount of teaching and training and investing into your child that you can do that will help them succeed. And so just kind of focusing on the fun part of the game and making sure that's a high priority as a parent, and arranging that environment and your interactions with your child is probably pretty crucial. I don't deal a lot with younger kids, but that would be just in my own experience in having kids that played sports, making sure that they're having fun, and just how underrated fun is. Like even in our world, even as adults, if we're not having fun, we're probably not hitting our stride. So make it fun and arrange the environment and our interactions with the people that we work with, I think is pretty crucial. That'd be number one. Number two is everybody talks to themselves. And even at a young age, even your son, they're talking to themselves. And so to help them simplify their self-talk, I think is pretty crucial. And there's a way to do that, but it's a way for them to learn to coach themselves, because they can't always be around the coach. The coach's voice or your voice isn't always in their head. So they need to learn to coach themselves in order to be effective. I think the third thing is to help those athletes emotionally regulate themselves. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. Life is just life. But it's more how we respond to those things that we're concerned with. And so helping people just regulate their emotions is really important. I think part of the reason is because we all underestimate how emotional we are as human beings, and what role that plays in our performance. And I think being able to really get a grip on how we think and how we feel things, and how we interpret our feelings and how we interpret stress, I think those things are all pretty crucial.
That's really good insight. I really appreciate that, especially the sort of self-talk. The way I say it is, you're telling yourself a story. What is the story that you're believing and you're telling yourself? So that's really awesome. I like that. Growing up a little bit. Okay, so that's younger kids. I have a nephew in college. He's at the University of Washington. He throws discus and shot put. He's in high school, he won a state, title, all that kind of stuff. He just had back surgery. Okay, so obviously his season is done, and he's got a road of recovery to come. What would you say to someone who's had, for his level, elite performance, has some aspirations and dreams, but then has this physical setback? What would be something you might say to him?
Yeah, I mean, an injury to an athlete is pretty traumatic. Not only do you not get to do the very thing that you love to do, but you're also taken out of a rhythm that you're typically used to. And I think any of us, when we're taken out of a pattern or a rhythm, we kind of feel like we're unanchored a little bit. It's a pretty devastating thing, and especially when they consider their future and if they're going to be able to continue in their sport. And so much of their identity is tied up in the sport. And I think we'd all love to say that's not true, or we'd like to work toward eliminating that dualistic view of ourselves. But it's pretty hard not to. It's pretty hard not to see ourselves as an athlete once you've been one for many, many years, especially if you've been successful at it. So rediscovering who you are apart from your sport, even in an injury, is pretty crucial. And one of the things I would encourage, or have encouraged, injured athletes to experience is kind of like a what can you do sort of attitude. Okay, so you can't do A, but what can you do? What other aspects of your game can you focus on and develop during your injury? And that actually this is an opportunity for you to dive deeper into a specific aspect of your sport, or even practice mental imagery and visualization at a whole new level. Because visualization is one of the most powerful tools I think any athlete will ever talk about. And I think the more that we can utilize our five senses in the visualization allows us to experience whatever it is that we are pre-practicing in our head. And so to be able to get those mental reps in, I think is pretty crucial. And I think the evidence and research is pretty clear on the more that you can practice those mental reps and not focusing on the most difficult or hard or the things that you failed at, but just practicing those mental reps of things that help you succeed or help you be at your very best, and movements that you want to replicate so that you can be at your very best. I think there's opportunity with everything. I remember a couple of years ago, I tore my left meniscus and I broke my elbow arm wrestling. And I paid the stupid tax of that. And I was pretty banged up. There were a couple other things. I was pretty banged up, but I never stopped going to the gym. And it wasn't a matter of, well, I can't do this, so why would I go?
Wow.
It's more like, well, what can I do? Even if I go, and what can I do here? And there's certain things that you can do. So you just got to kind of double down on what you can do and what you can figure out. And having that kind of an overcoming mentality will prove to be really, really valuable as your career extends.
Wow, that's really good. I think most people would just not go. I think that's just the reality, right? Most people would just not go. But that's really inspired to hear that even in the midst of an injury or a setback like that, you can find things that you can do in that same environment that'll keep you going. That's really cool.
Yeah, not only just to feel like you are keeping your head above water, but what can you actually really get better at? Because that idea of how can I get better really does miracles for your mindset. Like, it's just not a matter of, well, how do I get back to where I was so that I can perform at a high level? It's like, no. How can I actually get better at another aspect of my sport? And just having that kind of attitude, like that overcoming attitude is pretty special. It's kind of what we want to see with an injured athlete.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Some of what you said, I think you talk about this a little bit in some of your stuff, that like everything happens twice, once in your head and then actually doing it. You talk about visualization. Like tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And this hits home for all of us. Yeah. It's actually really interesting because if you can't see yourself doing something, let's say you've identified something in your business that you're struggling with accomplishing or achieving, or maybe you don't like making those cold, emails or cold phone calls or whatever. Like, so if you can't visualize yourself doing it. There's two ways of seeing, right? Like with your eyes and with your mind. So if you can't see yourself doing something, even in your mind, the odds of you not only doing it, but actually doing it well are so low that you might as well, it's going to be very hard for you to succeed if you can't even see yourself doing it. So the idea behind it is, how do I get enough mental reps in so that I can see myself doing something before I ever do it? And in that way, you already get reps and you already get opportunities in your own mind to see yourself in a different light, or see yourself talking in a certain way, or expanding, not just stepping outside of your comfort zone, but expanding your comfort zone to a point where, I think I can do this. And so I think seeing yourself doing something is really underrated. And I think it's something that we could all spend a little bit more time working on.
Yeah, I love that. That reminds me of like the race car drivers that are visualizing the course, and they're, sort of like doing it in their brain with their eyes closed and sort of like going through the motions before they ever get on the track. That's really powerful. How does someone do that in just leadership, aside from sports performance? How do they do that in leadership?
Yeah, I think you could tie it to a behavior or an action, but it's actually a lot easier if you can see yourself interacting a certain way, or let's say even being on a stage. So it has a lot more to do with being than doing something. So like, for example, if I am the way I like to say it is what kind of a person do I want to be? So do I want to be the kind of person that if it's 3 degrees colder outside, then am I going to quit? This literally happened to me, by the way, during COVID. It was, really cold February morning, and it's, 33 degrees. And I'm just like, man, what am I doing going out here, running up and down my hill and at the park at the bottom of my hill? And so it was pretty cold. And then the temperature dropped a degree. And the next morning it was snowing. And I thought, wow, I opened up my door. I saw the snow. I was like, there's no way I'm doing this, right? Like, there's no way it's snowing outside. And then I thought to myself, it's 1 degree. And do I want to be the kind of person that won't do something because it's 1 degree colder? I was like, I don't want to be that person. And so I just decided that a degree was not going to hold me back, and I was going to do something. So I think the crucial question is, what kind of a person do you want to be? Do you want to be the kind of person that before you go speak on stage, are you going to be the kind of person that is really nervous and anxious and just kind of sweat it out? Or are you going to be the kind of person who really just enjoys being up there and desires to be their very best? And I think there's one underrated aspect of this too that I've been thinking a lot about recently. And that is, and it does relate to what we're talking about, but just kind of let me just go down this
go for it.
rabbit path for a moment. But there's a difference, I think, between being authentic and being genuine.
Okay.
So if I'm going to be my authentic self, I'm going to reveal all sorts of things about myself. I'm going to sort of let it all hang out. I'm going to be fully transparent. That's my authentic self. However, I don't know if that's always appropriate to be my authentic self. Maybe it is dependent on the people that I'm with or the circumstance that I'm in. So can I always be my authentic self? Probably not. And I know that doesn't sound very good, but I think there's a better alternative, which is Gary being his genuine self and Micah being his genuine self. So if I'm going to go on stage, I'm going to feel like, I'm going to fake it till I make it. Or, how can I be my authentic self? Well, what if we just showed up as our genuine self, and that whatever I was going through personally or professionally, but I showed up being my genuine self? I wonder if there's value and merit in just showing up being my genuine self. And this happened. I was speaking in Calgary, Alberta, Canada a few months ago, and, my plane, I sat on a runway for 3 hours, and I was supposed to get into Calgary at, 10 p.m. I didn't get until 2 p.m. I didn't get back to my place where I was staying till 3 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Probably 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. And then I, needed to be up at 6 a.m. because I was going to have breakfast with someone. And then I presented all day from 8:30 or 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. And I thought to myself, man, I whatever it is, I don't have it because I am exhausted and I'm tired. I didn't want to cancel breakfast. And so I thought to myself, how do I just show up here? Do I show up with a bunch of energy, or do I just show up just being my genuine self? And I think viewing myself in that light and then noticing how people are reacting to my genuine self Because do they really need me to bring energy for 8 hours straight? Or can I just be my genuine self? And I found that people really responded to just my genuineness. And even though that I had had a pretty rough morning on previous day, it was pretty okay. It was pretty okay. And then, kind of reflecting on things Saturday night, I was like, I think this genuine thing, I think it can really fly. So I think how we view ourselves, our self-perception is probably a really valuable thing to double down on, because if we can show up as our genuine self, I think that's what people are really attracted to in the first place.
Yeah. So let me just ask a question about that. Like, when you decide I'm going to be my genuine self and you show up to that breakfast and you present all day, does that mean you have to like tell people about how difficult it was? Like, tell me about what does it mean to be genuine? Does it just mean that you don't bring all the extra energy that you would have to manufacture? Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. And I think, my wife and I had this rule when I was pastor for 30 plus years. If I couldn't leave at work what was work related, and if it affected my home life, then it was my job to confess whatever was going on inside of me. I had to confess to her what was going on. I'd reveal that to her so that she wouldn't be wondering if it was a problem with her or I was just in a cranky mood. I would kind of have to reveal that. And I think in the same way, I think it's pretty valuable when we can just be genuine. And so I did tell the crowd, and I think the crowd sort of knew because I think the word had gotten around. There was, I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 people in the room, but I think the word had gotten around. But I probably would have said something anyway and say, hey, listen, I got in at this time, this happened. But I just want you to know, man, I'm fully dialed into being here right now. I'm fully engaged. I am not holding anything back. I want to give you my very best. So yeah, maybe a little bit of, pretext was probably good, but I think it also gave me an opportunity to just be my genuine self. And I don't think they would have wanted anything other than that.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. Cause I think one of the challenges that I have when I listen to speakers is they'll say how great life is all the time. And then maybe they're doing a podcast or maybe they're on a stage or platform. And then 6 months later, they say, yeah, 6 months ago, that was the worst time of my life. I'm like,
yeah,
hey, wait a minute.
Hold on.
Why don't you show us how to struggle well? Like, why don't you show us what it's like to be in some really crappy situations, whether they're self-inflicted or not, and just help us watch you go through that, because that would be an education for everyone. And the Apostle Paul says this in the Bible, right? Because I'm a Bible guy. He says, hey, I didn't want to hide my hardships from you. I think as leaders, we can tend to do that because we don't want to alarm the people that we are leading. And so we kind of don't let them into our world. And that's one of the reasons why leadership, they say, can be really lonely, is because you're not sharing those things. So there's a level of wanting to protect the people that we care about from our hardships. But on the other hand, I don't know if that's the best thing sometimes. Like, I think there can be a great deal of mentoring that goes on, like mass mentoring that goes on in a sentence. When I'm going through something really difficult, hey, I want to be able to just be honest about it and share it with you.
That is so good. I'm just reflecting as you're talking about, growing up, I didn't know there was a money challenge until major change had to happen in our home. So like they had built their dream house. My dad's business was going well. There's a dry season in his business, but I was unaware. Now I was little. Maybe I was just unaware because I wasn't paying attention. Give them more credit. But I feel like we could have had a conversation as a family about, hey, we're going to be holding back the reins a little bit. We're going to be dialing it back because we're in a difficult season. And that way we would kind of all have some awareness that this difficulty is going on so that, when we eventually had to sell the house, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. Like, oh my gosh, what's happening? World's falling apart. That's really good.
They would have normalized going through hardship, and that's
Totally.
pretty normal.
Totally. Hey, let's turn the page a little bit here. Let's talk about you talk about 3 traits of elite performers. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think you're referring to a talk or two that I may have done in the past. So the way I would describe it is they know what they want, they know why they want it, and they know how badly they want it.
Okay.
So I think I have 2 or 3 talks on the subject, so I'm trying to pull up which one you might be referring to.
It doesn't matter. You just say
Yeah.
just say what you know is true.
Yeah. So what I know to be true is, okay, so the first one is you have to know who you are. So that's the first thing that I think is a non-negotiable. And here's why that's so important is because in order to be successful at anything, you have to be consistent. And the thing that you're most consistent at is being yourself. So the better that you know yourself and you know how you're wired, then the more likely that you can put yourself in a position to succeed because you know the environment that you work in and you kind of know some of your own tendencies. So your identity and like knowing who you are, that is, I mean, Jordan Peterson said it's the number one predictor of success is self-awareness. And so I think number one, knowing who you are is pretty crucial. Like, for example, there are certain things I don't like doing in my business and I can't do everything well. I can't. And so I do certain things well and I don't do other things really well. I know there are seasons where you kind of feel like you have to power through things and you got to just kind of be a jack of all trades, but master of none. Yeah, I get that. But I think knowing who you are and what kind of environments that you work in or kind of people that you work well with, I think that's pretty crucial. So number one is knowing who you are. Number two is knowing what you want. This one is maybe one of the most underrated things because if you don't know what you want, you won't take the risks necessary
Totally.
to get there, to get what you want. Because, and here's why, because you'll always hesitate. And what does hesitation cost in sports? Everything. Like right. It's like seconds. It's like a millisecond. Like I'm a big hockey guy, so I'm enthralled with the hockey playoffs right now. Right. Like I'm just mesmerized by just playoff hockey and just its quality. But a hesitation costs everything. And so what does hesitation cost in life? I mean, we divorce it from sports, but on the other hand, when it comes to life, we take a much longer approach to things. But the problem with taking much longer to resolve things or to fix things is that the more open loops there are,
Yep.
the worse our performance is. Because now we're carrying baggage, right? We're not closing these loops. And I think one of the primary causes of stress and anxiety is just not closing loops.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're wrong, just at least closing something for a period of time. Maybe you close the wrong thing, but that's okay because you learned that that was the right thing. So I think this idea of knowing what you want so that you can remove the hesitation, I think is a really crucial aspect. And it just requires risk and grit and determination. But if you're unsure, then you're just not going to risk what it takes to be really good at what you do.
That's really good. So the first, knowing yourself is, I think, probably important to actually get to the second thing, right? If you don't know yourself, it's hard to get to what you want and make shorter decisions and closing those loops because if you don't know who you are, it's like, well, I don't know. Is this going to be, you just get all wrapped up in the, I don't know, what if, I don't know, what if you don't have any idea who you are. So yeah, that's really good.
Agreed. And the third thing is that I don't know how to say this, but because it's not necessarily culturally friendly,
Okay.
but you just, how bad do you want stuff? Like if you want a handout, like in sports, the handout's not coming. You have to earn it in sports. And I think just generally in life, you just have to figure out and decide how badly you want something. So we have something, or I have something I call the illusion of choice. So if you want to be average at something, just be normal, well, you got lots of choices. Think about going to the Cheesecake Factory. You got lots of things on the menu.
Yeah.
If you want to be really good at something, you have far less choices. Okay. So on the menu, if you want to eat really well, or let's just say you're trying to eat excellent. And if you open up that menu, you just have far less choices.
Yeah.
If you want to be excellent and outstanding or even elite at what you do, at your eating, at your nutrition, well, how many choices do you have? You kind of basically have to say to yourself, I have no choice. These are the only things I can eat. And I think in life, Thomas Sowell, the great economist and philosopher, said it perfectly. Everything in life is a trade-off. So if people are stuck between deciding two things, it's typically because they don't want to give one of those two up. But you can't have both. Everything in life is a trade-off. So yeah, you are going to have discomfort in one area, but you can succeed at another area. And that's the trade-off. And I think in the same way, you have to decide how much you're willing to give to something. Or I think for professional athletes or people in business, they don't really live to balanced lives. That's more of and it doesn't exist at that level. I think the average person maybe could live more of a work balanced life. But I think for the most part, if you're going to be really excellent at what you do, you have to sort of live a little bit unbalanced. And I call it, you're kind of crazy. Like, what's your kind of crazy? Well, your kind of crazy might be that you eat a certain way, or that you practice a certain way, or that you are really passionate about your sport or your craft or whatever it is. And so I think those three things, knowing who you are, knowing what you want, and how badly you want it, are pretty fundamental to being successful at anything.
Yeah, I really like that. I would even say you might have just pulled out what to call that last thing instead of how badly, like, find your kind of crazy, or like, what is your kind of crazy, or
Yeah,
what's the level of crazy you want to be? You know what? Something to do with that really
I like
grabs,
that.
because I think most people are trying not to be crazy in everything. They're like, I don't want to look crazy. I don't want to
Well,
look crazy. But at some level, if you want to be elite, if I'm understanding you right, like, you're going to look crazy in some way. Like, everyone knows Gary Vaynerchuk, and he talks about how he wants to buy, a franchise and all this stuff. And that's what he wants. Right. But then he also talks about, it's not really about doing that. I don't know if I'm ever going to do that, but it's about the journey and the push and the drive that it creates in me to keep moving. And so, yeah, I'm going to spend some time thinking about my kind of crazy. What is my kind of crazy?
yeah, your obsession's probably your superpower. Because if you think about it, like, if you see that thing as a gift from God, whatever you're obsessed with, if you can see it as a gift from God and use it for redemptive purposes,
Wow.
then maybe that's a grace that God has given you in your life to double down on. And, like, for example, I have a son who I taught how to ride a bike, right? They start with the Hot Wheels, and then they go to the tricycle, and then they go to a bike with training wheels, and so on and so forth. And I remember one day I had this, I don't know, I guess it was an epiphany or a dream. And I just remember seeing my son. Actually, I didn't know who it was at first. I was transported into this really foggy, hilly area, and I didn't know where I was. And I just remember seeing my son ride this bike. And I was like, oh, that looks like my son, Zachary. And so he's riding this bike, and I didn't realize it at the moment. But, a few seconds later, I realized that he was in the Tour de France. And I was just like, oh, wait a minute. He had this love or passion for riding a bike when he was a little kid. And it was my job to, like, nurture that and encourage that. But then he took that gift that he had and that passion, and he just went all the way with it. He took it as far as he could go. And I think that's really a great example of what we mean by our kind of crazy. Or if you're obsessed with something, what if God has given us a gift or a talent or ability? And what if we were just to take it to the nth degree and see how far we could go with something? What a fun way to look at life.
So good. I had a friend whose dad, he's probably in his 70s. I remember him saying, yeah, I'm training to be a world-class trumpet player. And I kind of chuckled, like, what? What are you talking about? What do you mean? And he's like, yeah, I want to be the best in the world. And I'm like, he is not a musician, other than he started picking up the trumpet, and he has this idea he wants to be the best in the world. I'm like, well, that's kind of crazy. I don't even know why, but that's cool. You go do it. You kind of want to cheer people on when they're a little bit like that. So
I think some people could look at us and say, well, that's pretty delusional. But my response to that is are we sure that we're seeing life accurately anyway? Like, how sure are we of that our perspective or our outlook on life or our worldview is 100% accurate anyway? So if we get to put ourselves in the best position to succeed, if we get to choose those things, why not stack the deck with a bunch of aces so that we can achieve whatever it is that we think we can do, and just see how far we can take it? And it's a mystery how far we can take it, but you just kind of never know what's possible if you really just pursue that. And I think it's actually one of my secret sauces. And I'm nowhere, right? Like, I'm not anyone to necessarily emulate, but yeah, I've had some really great, wonderful opportunities in my life. I have an opportunity with the Seahawks just in the last couple of weeks. And then in August, I have another opportunity with the Oregon Duck football team. And it's like, well, how far can I take this thing? Like, why not? There's a Super Bowl champion and a perennial top 5 college football team in the nation. Like, and who am I? I'm just a solo guy doing my thing, right? But On the other hand, I wonder how far I can take whatever gifts and talents that God has given me and use it for his glory. And so it's just like, let's go on this ride. Let's see how far we can take it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you spending the time with me, hanging out, talking through some of this stuff, some of how you think, how you're talking to other people. Of course, there's so much more depth that we could go into. There's so many more concepts that you could address and give some enlightenment to. Where could someone find you if they wanted to get more information about you or what you're doing, or just follow along your journey?
I appreciate that. I think most of my clients hang out on Instagram and LinkedIn. So those are my two primary. Instagram would be Elite Mindset. I'm the guy with the blue verified dot, so Elite Mindset. And then on LinkedIn, just my name, Gary Chupik. And, people can find me there.
Perfect. We'll put some links down below, but just one more question. Gary, if you could kind of sit across from every overwhelmed leader listening right now, what's the one thing that you think is universal that you would say to all of them?
Yeah, I have two, but the first one
Okay.
might hold a little bit more water, which is you could never control outcomes, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed. And I think if you live your entire life that way, if you parent that way, if you lead that way, you'll always have something to contribute to a conversation. You'll always have a way to improve yourself. So if an outcome doesn't turn out a way that you were hoping to, well, what could I have done better to put myself in a position to succeed? Could I have slept better? Could I have eaten better? Could I have studied better? Could I have been more prepared? Could I have done, it's such a wonderful invitation and challenge to be able to live your life that way. So if there was one thing I could say, it wouldn't be, don't worry so much about the outcome. You can throw the best pitch in the world and it'd still get hit for a dinger. You just don't worry about the outcome. Just worry about putting yourself in the best position to succeed. So that would be, let's just stay with that. How about that? That's a good way to end. And it's a way that I live my life. And I would invite your listeners to do the same.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. And we just really thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom with us today. And hope you get to have all those opportunities and future opportunities and bigger and just see how far God takes you.
I appreciate that. Let's see how far we can go, right?
Yes. Well, that's Gary Chupik. If you want to connect with him, head over to Instagram at Elite Mindset or find him on LinkedIn under his name. We'll have those links in the show notes below. Big takeaway for me, you can't control outcomes, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed. That's how you live. That's how you lead. That's how you parent. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time. God bless. Oh, you're still here. Well, if you're still here and you're hanging about and you just want to see what the PS is at the end of this, the PS is this. Please subscribe. That's PS. This podcast is for leaders. We want to help as many leaders as possible by way of bringing great content that actually impacts how they perform, but also introduce them to the idea of executive assistance and what that can do for them. If you know a leader that needs this content, please forward it, but make sure to subscribe because it helps us get that into the hands and ears of more people. Thanks so much.